Oil is found in only a few hills and valleys throughout the world, mainly in the United States, Canada, and Mexico, in Peru and Venezuela, in the Balkans, along the Persian Gulf, and in the Dutch East Indies. Over half the oil that has been produced in the whole world was produced in the United States, mainly in the states of Texas, California, Louisiana, and Oklahoma. The story of how oil is brought up from far down in the earth is exciting. The products of oil or petroleum are necessary for us to live the way we do today. We need gasoline to run our automobiles and airplanes, fuel oil to run our modern trains, kerosene to heat our houses, and of course we need the oils that keep our powerful machines running. Bob Gaffner lives near the oil fields and likes to watch the men drill for oil. The high towers or derricks are needed to lift the long lengths of pipe over the wells. Here, the men are lowering the drill pipe into the well. They swing another length into position and screw it to the top of the last length of pipe that was lowered. The men use a large wrench called a tong to screw the lengths of pipe together. The pipe is slowly lowered into the well by the large yellow pulley or block. As the hole becomes deeper, more lengths of pipe are added at the top. They drill deep enough to find the oil deposits. The men make frequent tests to find out which layer of rock or sand contains the most oil. Formerly, oil drilling was a gamble. Many fortunes were made and lost. It is still a hazardous occupation, but with modern scientific methods for finding the oil and with the improved drilling machinery, there is a far greater chance for success when they drill. Bob asks why the men wear metal hats. Well, that's easy. Tools might be dropped accidentally by the men who work at the top of the derrick. The hole is actually drilled by a square pipe called a kelly that is always fastened on the top of the drill pipe. The kelly fits into a strong table that is turned round and round by powerful engines. This turns the drill at the bottom of the well. As the hole becomes deeper, more drill pipes are added. The piece of machinery that digs the hole at the bottom of the drill pipe is the bit. Jerry shows Bob a bit. The sets of teeth turn round and round to dig the hole, just like claws. It is said that oil hunters never can be sure of a strike until the bit cuts into the oil sand or oil rock. Notice the large center hole. Mud and water are washed with great force from the top of the kelly down the center of the pipes through this hole in the bit. The water and mud clean off the teeth of the bit and contain chemicals that make the mud in the hole form a hard crust that seals up the hole. This prevents cave-ins and keeps the water and gas in the different layers of earth from pouring into the well and stopping it up. Notice how clean the engines are. When the men have finished drilling a section of the well, they build the permanent well to this depth. The permanent well is made out of heavy pipes called casing. Thus, they alternate the drilling and the laying of the permanent pipe. The lengths of pipe are screwed together with a tong in the same way that the drill pipes are screwed together. The men step back out of the way of the machinery to avoid accidents. And now the large pipe goes down. Just think, sometimes these pipes go 3 miles down into the ground. When they have finished drilling the well, they place a small pipe called tubing inside the heavy casing, and this small pipe carries the oil to the surface. At the bottom of the well, gas and rock pressure force the oil out of the sand and porous rock and into the tubing. A high tower called a mast is used to lift the small tubing over the well. The derrick man at the top of the mast fastens the tubing in the block and swings it over the well. The men screw the length of tubing together and signal a driller who runs the engine to lower it into the well. When the well is drilled, the pump will be put in position on top. The Long Beach oil fields have produced millions of barrels of oil. These pumps are modern and up to date. They go up and down, perhaps bringing a fortune to the people who own them. The wells look like a row of animals nodding. And yes, the part that bows really is called a horse's head. And the cross rod that goes up and down like a teeter-totter is called a pony rod. On the opposite side from the head is the counterbalance. Bob looks at the oil pressure gauge that is watched carefully by the men who service the wells. It shows the men that the oil well is producing. At this well, the valuable oil is leaking and the repair crew must find the trouble. They're good mechanics and soon the well will be working. No one knows exactly how oil is made. It is generally thought that plant and animal life buried far down in the earth in vast prehistoric seas was changed slowly into oil, probably by pressure, heat, and the decaying of the tiny plant and animal life. They say that Texas, our greatest oil-producing state, literally rests on an ocean of oil. The men paint the pumps often to protect them from dirt and water. Eric wears a mask so that he will not breathe the poison fumes from the paint. The wet gas that comes up with the oil sometimes is run off at the wells. You can see the gas tanks or traps at the wells and at the field storage tanks. Wastewater also comes up with the oil and is removed at the field storage tanks. These three boilers heat the oil so that it will float on top of the water and the men can remove the water from the bottom of the tanks. Here the oil is pumped from the field tanks to the refineries with their huge storage tanks. Sometimes the crude oil is carried in pipes across several states to the refineries. For example, a pipeline carries oil from Texas all the way to New York. The crude oil also is carried to the refineries by train, by ship, and by tank trucks. Crude oil must be changed at the refineries into the products we use. The wind is blowing a terrific gale, and Bob is amazed that the men can work high up in the derrick. They are taking the derrick apart to move it to another location. They unbolt the different sections and lower each section separately. The men are skilled to work high up on the narrow beams. Oilmen must be strong to operate the heavy machinery. They must think accurately in the midst of noise and confusion. Their very lives depend on each man's cooperating and doing his part well. The men walk on the narrow ledges as unconcernedly as if they were walking on the ground. The pay in the oil fields is high and attracts many smart and well-educated men. And now the ground crew pull together to guide the heavy section as it is lowered slowly to the ground. Men who cannot keep up with the difficult work soon drift to other occupations. The man on the truck operates the engine that runs the lines. They unscrew the bolts on another section. This well produces a large quantity of oil, and the men will replace the old pump with a modern one. And down comes another section. They wind up the long lengths of line. Many different tools are used in drilling. They're always kept in order, ready for the next job. There is a special place on the truck for each part of the machinery. Bob hears the fire engines. Better hurry. What's that? An oil well burning. Just think, right on the ocean beach. Thousands of dollars worth of oil burning up. The men fear the whole oil field will catch fire, and they are working desperately to prevent more loss. Large fire trucks stand in line to take turns pouring chemicals on the flames. The fire finally was put out by pouring water from the well next to it into the bottom of the well. This meant the temporary loss of the other well, but prevented the fire from spreading to the rest of the field. Oil is one of our most important natural resources, and it is necessary to be careful of our supply and save it in every way we can. Bob understands now that there is great danger of fire in the oil industry. Every fire precaution is taken on the docks, where the drums of oil are stored for shipment to the countries that need oil. There are many large countries, like France and Germany, that do not have oil and must ship it in from the oil-producing countries. England does not have oil, but the British Empire controls many of the foreign oil fields. There is oil in Canada. The Americans, the English, and the Dutch have found and produced most of the oil in the world. Bob likes to ask the oil man questions about oil. Here, the longshoremen are loading a freighter bound for France. Oil is the largest export from the ports of Long Beach and Los Angeles. They ship oil to Oregon, Washington, Hawaii, and the Orient. $200 million worth a year. Bob thinks the oil drums look like bright colored toys. He would like to try to ride one of the rolling drums. Four drums are hoisted onto the ship at one time. Each load is counted twice. First on the dock by a checker from the oil company, and again on board by a ship's officer. Thus, the companies buying and selling the oil both have a record of the oil shipped. Just think, in 1 year, the United States produces over $3 billion worth of oil. Well, Bob thinks this cable spool looks like an oil drum. Well, he can try to ride it. Hey, careful there, fella. Steady now. Hey, that's pretty good. It's like a circus. Whoop, whoop, take it easy. Yes, sir, he's just like a circus performer. That looks like a lot of fun, Bob. A large tanker steams into port. Today, many hundreds of oil tankers carry oil from wells to the markets of the world. These large tankers carry around 130,000 barrels of oil. The tankers refuel from the large hoses on the docks. The hose is swung onto the ship, and the oil flows directly into the tanks in the ship. The flow of oil is controlled by large valves on the ship and on the dock. Oil ships are built with rows of tanks on each side. Thus, when the ship rolls, the oil will not all shift to one side and capsize the ship. Down the center is the catwalk. The crew can walk from the bow to the stern without getting wet when the waves roll over the deck. The cover is raised over one tank that is being filled. The men watch the oil gauge to see when the tank is full. Oil companies maintain large plants with storage tanks at the docks. 1 million men work in the oil industry. In front of the freighter, an oil barge is loading. These barges carry oil to the ships. Often, they refuel the ships at their own docks, but sometimes the barges refuel ships far out in the bay. When a ship drops anchor in the harbor and refuels there, she is said to be at bunkers. The oil is piped through the heavy hoses from the barge to the ship. If the ship does not have cargo or passengers for the port, it saves time and money to refuel at bunkers. Across the channel, Bob sees a wrecked oil tanker that burned at the dock. It is too soon for the salvage crews to enter the ship because there is still oil in the hull that might explode. No one knows what caused the terrible explosion. Many were killed instantly. Others had to dive into the water covered with flaming oil and swim underwater to safety. Just think, one match thrown carelessly away could have caused this huge explosion. We understand now why the oil docks are built away from the mainland and why the refineries are built away from the docks. Near his home, Bob likes to stop by the garage and watch the men work on the cars. Bill, the mechanic, tells the boys how he fixed the broken oil line caused by a bad bump. Bob's friend works here after school and on Saturdays. Bob wishes he knew as much as Teddy about a car. Teddy checks the oil and adds a quart. Oil is mighty important in keeping an automobile running smoothly. As gasoline, it is needed as fuel for the engine. and as grease for many purposes, just as it is needed to keep the machinery running in our big industrial plants. The silver towers that make the refineries look like fairyland castles really are places where the oil products are made. The crude oil in the towers is heated by steam, which is piped to the top of the towers. The different degrees of heat and pressure break up the crude oil into many different products. The lighter products go to the top of the towers. Gasoline is the lightest and can be run off the top. Next is kerosene, and so on down the length of the tower. Bob tries to understand what oil means to us today. Why, oil changes miraculously into power. Power to run the giant plants that make the things we need and use. Power to speed our modern trains, ships, airplanes, and automobiles. Oil is a great industry, supplying the needs of people throughout the world.